Hey guys, welcome to mathspays.com. We're looking at goods and services tax, GST, mainly GST for the Australians, but certainly sales tax for the Americans and value added tax for most other people. Apologies if I missed you, but certainly it's pretty much the same sort of strategies. So goods and services tax, first of all, brief introduction about what is goods and services tax or what is value added tax. And basically it's money paid to the government that covers things such as, park fees, bin fees, maintenance of roads and costs associated with external outside your household, I guess. So all that kind of money goes towards getting your beaches clean, your parks clean, all that kind of stuff. So it's important. It goes with income tax, but basically this is added on to normal goods and services. Okay, so if you're going to go buy a TV, you'll see a GST or a VAT added to that. If you're going to go to the doctors, maybe not the doctors, but certainly a lot of other places, they'll add tax and some sort of GST on top of that as well. Items such as bread and water and those sort of basic necessities that we need to live are exempt from GST, but everything else has it on. In some countries like Australia, we use a 10% GST. The VAT is currently 17.5% VAT. I'm not sure what it is in the US, but certainly it does change from place to place. But it all balances out because if you have a higher GST or VAT, you'll have a lower income tax theoretically. Okay, but anyway, that's a little bit what GST is, more to nitty gritty of what you guys need to know, and that's how to answer the questions. Two types of questions. This is going to be type 1. This is, to be honest, it's not actually the common type. This is the easier question. We normally get the more challenging questions. So in this case, we've got a camera that costs $350. I'm going to write that amount down. That's important. And this is before. That's really significant. This is before the 10% GST has been added. So I guess this part here, that is my original amount of it. And what we're trying to work out, it says how much would the total cost of the camera be, including, spelling error, including the GST. So what we need to figure out, well, if the GST in Australia is 10%, okay, we're simply going to times that by 10%. Remember too, that can be 0.1, it can be 10 over 100 or 1 over 10, whatever you want to have it. Whatever way you like to do that, it's going to be $35. So that's how much the actual GST component is going to be. Some questions might just ask for that, and you got the answer, we can move on. But in this case, we want the total cost of the camera. So the original cost is $350. The GST is $35, which means the total cost is going to be $385. And for those of you who are using the more advanced method, I've mentioned this previously. Yes, you can absolutely use the more advanced method for this and say 350 times 1.1. That will automatically generate the $385. Okay, so of course my price after GST has been included will be more, therefore that's my correct answer. Okay, unfortunately though guys, that's not going to be your usual question. This little guy is going to be your normal question, and it's the one that most people get wrong. Okay, so this question is your question 2. Okay, the second type, the most common type. We got a bike. It's costing $2,380, and that is significant there. It says that is after the GST has been included. Okay, so obviously we have our original price, which we don't know what that's going to be, but we do know that that's 100% of the actual price. What we have got currently, we've got the original price plus the extra 10%, which means we actually have got the price of 110%, and that's what I often like to write down as my very first line of working, that 110% equals to $2,380. Now it says here, how much would the bike have cost before GST was added, which means at the end of this, that's what we want. We want the original price, the 110%. So at the moment we've got 110%, we want to get to 100%. Usually we can't go from one to the other in one hit. There is a more advanced method which I'll show you in a moment, but usually what we like to do is to use what we refer to, That's a little bit big there, isn't it? We'll often want to use what we refer to as the unitary method. You might be familiar with that term, the unitary method, which is we find 1% of the amount because it's 1 unit. So what we're actually doing to get 1% of the amount, we can actually divide both sides by 110 because 110 divided by 110 is actually 1. So we can divide both sides by 110 to get what that 1% is going to be. So we simply type that into calculator and you're going to get a bit of an awkward answer here. We get $21.63, and I'm going to use the ellipsis here, which means that number goes on forever. Please don't round there, always round at the end. Now, that's what 1% is. So how do we now change 1% into 100%? Well, I got one of them. I want 100 of them. We simply times it by 100. So I'm simply now going to times the calculator times 100. I'm going to leave the answer in, and now I can round to get my final answer of $2,163.64. The most common mistake is people find 10% of 2380. The issue is going to be that you're finding a percent of the final amount as opposed from the original, and it just doesn't work. Okay, so I often refer to this as a reverse GST question because you have the answer, you need to go back to what we started with. Okay, now again, I did say that there was a more, well, I'm going to say a more advanced method of using it. I don't like this method, I'll be honest with you, but what some people will do, in that previous question, I'm just going to flick back to it. You notice the advanced method was timesing by 1.1, okay, was timesing by 1.1 there. So the more advanced method is doing the opposite of that, and you could actually go 2380 divided by 1.1, and if we whack that in our calculator, so 2380 divided by 1.1, we actually come out with our 2163.64 automatically. So that is a quick way, but the reason I don't like that method is that they won't always give the GST as 10%. So for example, they might give you the VAT at 17.5%, which means that you're dividing it by 1.175. As opposed to timesing by 1.175. So this is just a better method. I like the unitary method. It works for lots of different questions, not just GST questions, but lots of sales questions as well. So I think this is a really cool answer. The other thing too to note, just be careful in the question. Do they want the total cost before GST was added, or do they just want the GST? Because in that case, we just want that extra 10%, which is going to be what our next question is going to be. Okay, so our last question, guys. This is another reverse. Sorry, that's happening a fair bit today. A reverse GST question. So you might want to pause this and have a crack at it, guys, and then play and see how you get on. All right, guys, welcome back. Hopefully you got the right answer. Let's have a quick crack at it. So we've got the new PlayStation 5 VR console retailing for $1,150, and this includes 10%. The minute I say includes 10%, that's the very first thing that I'm writing down. My 110% equals $1,150. Once again, if it's 17.5% for your VAT or something similar, 15% sales added tax, then you're doing 117.5 or 115. So it works either way. Okay, now this question is asking how much GST, which means what we're looking for is not the 100%, we just want the 10% that was added originally. But I'm going to use the same method we mentioned in that last question. I want to use the unitary method. Okay, so I'm going to find 1%. How do I do that? Well, we divide by 110. I don't think it's going to give me a nice answer, but I'm going to whack it in the calculator nonetheless, and we get $10.45 recurring. I'm going to use the ellipses there. That means it continues. So in order to get the 10%, well, you could find the 100% and then just find the difference between them. But it's also just easy to times this by 10 to get 10%. So I'm going to whack it by 10, okay, and I end up getting $104 and now I can round my answer to be 55 cents. So that's how much the GST was added. If I wanted the actual price of it before GST, you can now subtract that from the answer. But that for me is a really easy way of doing it. If you're using the more advanced sort of method of doing that, I guess you could do the same sort of thing, but it's going to be a bit harder because you'll be doing 1150 dividing it by 1.1. Okay, and then you'd have to subtract it from the original amount. You could also 1150, I think, divide it by 0.1. That would work as well. No, actually it wouldn't. So that's why I don't like that method. It doesn't work all the time for exactly what you want. Go with unitary. Unitary works for all questions. Anyway, guys, in a nutshell, that's GST questions. Remember the reverse GST question, that's what we're going to see more of. But don't forget, you might get that easier question every now and then. So the main thing to look at is, has the GST been included in the price, or are you adding it on top of what you've got? Have a great day, guys. That is GST, as I said. Any questions, drop me an email. See you later.